Excellencies, Petra Bayer, Chairwoman of the Foreign Policy Committee of the Austrian Parliament, Rector Schneider, first and foremost, Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Alain Berset, representatives of permanent missions and international organizations, representatives of our partner institutions, the Central European University, the Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs, and the Council of Europe, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly a great privilege for us at the Vienna School of International Studies, the Diplomatic Academy, to welcome the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Alain Berset. Although he needs not really an introduction, let me just briefly summarize his most impressive career. Alain Berset was born in Fribourg in Switzerland. He holds a master's degree in political science and a PhD in economics both from the University of Neuchâtel. Secretary General Berset was an elected minister in the Swiss government in the Federal Council between 2012 and 2023. During that time, he headed the Federal Department of Home Affairs as Swiss Minister for Health, Social Affairs, Culture, Equality and Anti-Discrimination, and was Minister for Public Health in a certainly very difficult period throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Monsieur Berset also served twice as President of the Swiss Confederation, 2018 and 2023, during which he represented Switzerland at the United Nations Security Council and at the Council of Europe's fourth summit of heads of state and government, where he signed the Reykjavik Declaration on behalf of his country. Before joining the Federal Council, Mr. Berset was a member of the Council of States, the upper house of the Swiss Parliament. He was elected as its youngest member in 2003 and went on to serve as its president from 2008 to 2009. He was also vice chair of the Socialist Group in the Federal Parliament 2005 to 2011. Prior to elected politics, Mr. Berset held academic roles in economics at the University of Neuchâtel and the Hamburg Institute of International Economics, and worked as an independent communications and strategy consultant for associations, companies, and non-governmental organizations. Alain Berset became Secretary General of the Council of Europe on the 18th of September 2024. He is the 15th Secretary General of the Council of Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, Austria became a member of the Council of Europe on the 16th of April 1956 and has always had a particularly close relationship with the Council of Europe. 3 Secretary Generals were Austrians, as well as 2 presidents of the Parliamentary Assembly and 2 presidents of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities of Europe. We are looking forward to celebrating 70 years of our membership next year. The most important task of the Council of Europe, as you know, is to protect and promote human rights, but also democracy and the rule of law in Europe. It also focuses on fostering a common European cultural identity, addressing social problems facing member states, and consolidating democratic stability through cooperation and the setting of standards. Its work has certainly never been more relevant than today. Let me just take a very brief look back into history. In 1993, the World Conference on Human Rights took place in Vienna, which saw a commitment of all states to fulfill their obligations to promote universal respect for and observance and protection of all human rights and fundamental freedoms. They declared the universal nature of these rights and freedoms are beyond question. In the same year, at the first ever summit of the Council of Europe, the heads of state and government met in Vienna upon Austria's invitation and focused on a new guiding principle: democratic security. The Vienna Declaration of the 9th of October 1993 stated, and I quote, "We, heads of state and government of the member states of the Council of Europe, meeting for the first time in our organization's history at this Vienna Summit Conference, solemnly declare the following. The end of the division of Europe offers a historic opportunity to consolidate peace and stability on the continent. All our countries are committed to pluralist and parliamentary democracy, the indivisibility and universality of human rights, the rule of law and common cultural heritage enriched by its diversity. Europe can thus become a vast area of democratic security. Secretary General Berset has just returned from his first official visit to Portugal, where he addressed the need for Europe states to engage in a new Democratic Pact for Europe, a shared commitment aimed at enhancing democratic security on the continent. Dear Mr. Secretary, we are very much looking forward to your speech, but before that, permit me to invite our partner of today's event, the Central European University's Interim President and Rector, Mr. Carsten Schneider, to deliver his welcome remarks. By the way, the Secretary General has agreed after his speech to take some questions, and I would invite you to think about good questions for the Secretary General. I thank you very much.
Good evening. We are honored to co-host this event. CU is a university that is founded on the conviction that freedom, open inquiry, and the rule of law are the oxygen of Europe. Tonight, we host the Secretary General of the Council of Europe to discuss a question at the heart of CU's mission. How do democracies keep themselves safe without ceasing to be democracies? The Council of Europe's guiding idea of democratic security says that Europe's safety rests not only on armies and borders, bombs and tanks, but on institutions that people can trust. Independent courts, free media, free elections, accountable governments, and equal protection under the law. Now, from disinformation and strategic corruption to foreign interference, democratic backsliding, and the weaponization of the law, today's threats erode precisely those very institutions from within. That means that security policy that ignores the quality of democracy is security policy with a blind spot. The political theorist Karl Löwenstein taught us that democracies may need constitutional self-defense, what we call militant democracy or wehrhafte Demokratie in German, to resist actors who use freedoms to abolish freedom. Think of targeted party dissolution in extreme cases, bans of paramilitary groups, or firm rules against hate speech and incitement to violence. So this means there needs to be a twin strategy of building and defending. We need to build democratic security and invest long-term into judicial independence, anti-corruption, media freedom, inclusion, and civic education. And the defending part is that militant democracy, which deploys precise, lawful guardrails when actors cross red lines. And together they form a resilience and resistance model. Militant measures must be exceptional, proportionate, and reviewable. They are not a carte blanche. The rule of law converts power into legitimate authority through legality, necessity, and oversight. Now, the democratic security test is simple but demanding. Does a proposed restriction actually reduce the threat to democracy? And can we apply this measure while preserving pluralism? If the answer to either question is no, the cure may be worse than the disease. And I'm going slightly off script now. I had the pleasure and honor to supervise a master thesis that won the Ask to Sandy Prize this year at the Central European University, where the student asked precisely this question. She focused on the public perception of banning the AfD in Germany, and she ran some survey experiments and found out that this might lead to an increase of support among voters for the AfD, which you would think, okay, that is to be expected, but it might also lead to a decline in trust in the very precise institution of democracy among opponents of the AfD. So that means to me that militant democracy is not just a legal challenge, but it is a political challenge, and it must be accompanied with measures that are taken in addition to sort of taking legal party bans. Universities strengthen democratic security by defending academic freedom and by educating citizens who are resistant to authoritarian shortcuts. CU is proud to partner with institutions that keep Europe a community of law and not force. Democratic security without the capacity for self-defense is naive. Militant democracy without rights is self-defeating. Europe needs both, held together by the Council of Europe's legal space and by a civic culture that prefers hard arguments to easy enemies. With this, it's my honor to welcome the Secretary General of the Council of Europe. Few roles better embody this balance between building resilient democracies and defending them with principled restraint. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rector Schneider. Secretary General, the floor is yours, please.
Vielen Dank. Exzellenzen, meine Damen und Herren, ich möchte wirklich auf Deutsch beginnen hier in Wien, wenn ich darf. Einige Wörter zuerst mal um der Diplomatischen Akademie Wien, dem österreichischen Bundesministerium für europäische und internationale Angelegenheiten sowie der Central European University für diese Einladung sehr herzlich zu danken. Es ist mir wirklich eine Ehre, an einer Institution zu sprechen, die so tief in der Geschichte Europas und der Welt verwurzelt ist. Ein Ort, der Generationen von Diplomatinnen und Diplomaten geprägt hat und Ideen hervorgebracht hat, die bis heute Frieden und Sicherheit auf unserem Kontinent beeinflussen. Demokratie, Sicherheit, Erinnerung, Multilateralismus, Verantwortung. Diese Worte prägten einst die Nachkriegsordnung. Doch heute werden sie als elitär, vogue oder sogar tot abgetan. In dieser neuen Welt gilt Demokratie als Schwäche, Wahrheit als Meinung, Gerechtigkeit als Option. Kann Demokratie sich selbst noch verteidigen in einer Gegenwart, in der die alte Welt vergangen ist, die neue Welt noch nicht angekommen ist und das Konzept langfristiger Verantwortung vor unseren Augen zu verschwinden scheint? Can democracy still defend itself in a present where the old world is gone, the new world has not yet arrived, and the idea of long-term responsibility seems to be vanishing before our eyes? This is the question we need to answer as we look back on 30 years of democratic security in Europe. And as you remember before, as you remind us before, it all started right here in Vienna in October 1993. It was the first summit of heads of states and government of the Council of Europe. And they spoke of the end of Europe's division, of the historic opportunity to secure peace and stability across the continent. And for them, Europe was poised to become a vast area of democratic security. And they saw democratic security as a destination, not yet as a daily defense. I think for us today it is hard to put ourselves in their shoes. So allow me to see their Europe through the eyes maybe of, well, as a coincidence, my two advisors who are with me tonight. Julie, this time 1993, was starting kindergarten in Switzerland. That year, this very year, Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization signed the Oslo Accords. Tensions were rising in Rwanda. And the United Nations designated Srebrenica as a UN safe area. Which brings me to Krejimir, also with us this evening. He was a 10-year-old boy growing up in a Balkan region at war. Or I can also speak about myself. I was at the University of Neuchâtel, 21 years old, a young student interested in politics and economics. It was also the year the Maastricht Treaty came into force, paving the way for the euro. And I knew there was more to this Europe than market, currency, and economic integration. But now, many young Europeans have known for most of their lives is a continent at peace. A peace that rests on democracy, on human rights, and the rule of law. The very values the Council of Europe was created to protect. But this is about to change. 800 billion euros in planned defense spending is a lot of money. In just 5 or 10 years, Europe could be stronger militarily, but weaker democratically. A continent rearmed, yet a society divided. Divided by the politics of anti-politics, by polarization and extremism, driven by social media, artificial intelligence, deep fakes, disinformation. This is the trajectory we are on today. On one side, a lot of investments in defense, military weapons, for legitimate reasons, by the way. On the other side, backsliding democracy. It's not about the static view of this situation. It's about the dynamic view of this situation. What does it mean in 10 years if we just see this evolution happening without to do something to have an equilibrium and a balance? What if one day an extremist group came to power in one of these highly militarized states? We cannot afford a short memory. How would they use those weapons? Against whom? I mean, it is the question that should keep us up at night. Yes, maybe we have been naive. We thought democracy would simply expand generation after generation, that peace in Europe would simply endure. But we were not ready for a world of disinformation, deep fakes, and hate speech. Nor did we expect governments to challenge the authority of the European Court of Human Rights. But there is no way back to the old world, only a way forward. And that means having a new version, democratic security. We can call it democratic security 2.0, one that transcends the outdated divides between hard and soft security, to confront cyber attacks, terrorism, climate change, and hybrid threats, and to place our shared values at the heart of Europe's collective defense. I think we must understand security in a more comprehensive way, not just as military power, but as strong institutions and solid political and democratic processes. And nowhere is this more evident than in Ukraine. There, we, with the Council of Europe, we have launched the most ambitious action plan in our history to prepare for elections that are free, fair, and transparent. We are also supporting reforms to fight corruption, to strengthen the judiciary, to make institutions resilient. It is an enormous project with around 100 people working in Ukraine. The slow, essential work of democratic reform, which is the foundation of reconstruction. And of course, our action in Ukraine does not stop there. We have created the register of damage, and we are preparing a future claims commission. The next important step will be in December this year, in more or less 2 months now. We are also advancing work towards a special tribunal for the crime of aggression. We just received funding for the preparation of the whole tribunal. Not to mention the European Court of Human Rights, and let me insist on this, the European Court of Human Rights, the only international court hearing human rights cases linked to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Together, all those elements together, these are the building blocks of democratic security. Because without accountability, without strong institutions that create stability, without all of those elements, there can be no peace. And without peace, can there be a Europe, a stable and prosperous Europe? Yes, I mention this because Ukraine is the front line of democratic security. But another front is opening in our minds. The challenge is no longer getting information, it is knowing what to believe. And in this parallel reality, truth is treated as a commodity. Disinformation is one of the fastest growing threats to democracy. Its scale is staggering. Let me mention elections in Moldova and Czechia have been flooded with coordinated fake news. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, fake news in Czechia has risen to 5,000 articles a month. The 16 largest disinformation sites now publish more than all traditional media combined. And the poison spreads further. TikTok videos of Hitler's speeches go viral. His voice recreated by artificial intelligence. The captions, just listen, what if he had won? And we cannot be complacent, even when one of our closest allies say, it's a quote, if your democracy can be destroyed by a few €100,000 of digital advertising, then it wasn't very strong to begin with. That raises a deeper question about the kind of democracy we want. Do we want one that waits until it is too late, or one strong enough to act? To regulate the platforms, to challenge the business models, and to defend the public space even when it is hard. I think in this situation, the greatest danger is not to collapse. It's not to collapse. The greatest danger is the slow, quiet slide into a system that restricts liberty in the name of protecting it, that weakens institutions out of calculation or cynicism, that bends the rules under the guise of sovereignty, security, or emergency. We must not sleepwalk into that future. That's exactly why we need a new democratic pact for Europe. And the Council of Europe has launched this idea, a pact for a new era of democratic security. And it is not a theoretical exercise. We are exploring tools to counter disinformation and foreign interference, drawing on lessons from many of our member states. I mentioned before Moldova. It could be an example. It could take the form of a convention, one that would help democracies confront vote buying, online manipulation, and digital interference in elections. Its shape will be defined together with all member states and all those who choose to take part. The technological and geopolitical context has changed, as we see, as we know, and with it, the very conditions for democracy itself. Our system must adapt. But beyond democracy itself, what is at stake is our European way of life. And if we care about it, we must commit to defend it with patience, with persistence, and with a long view. 30 years ago, I was mentioning this before, in this city, Europe saw the end of its division and the beginning of a vast area of democratic security. But history does not travel in a straight line. The world we knew is gone, the new one is uncertain, yet the Council of Europe was not created for a moment of calm. It was built to hold firm when orders waver. 1949, as the Council of Europe was created, it was just after the Second World War. after years of suffering, destruction. It was exactly to make as sure as possible that it will never again happen. It was not made for good weather conditions. It was made for tough conditions, and it is now. With the values, with the fundamentals that we share. And today, Europe's order cannot rest on fear, force, or division. It must be renewed through democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, to make democratic security the heart of Europe's new order. And, saying this, our first line of defense. I think that is the road ahead. I will be really happy to have the occasion to exchange with you now also on this, and thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. Secretary General, thank you so much for the speech, which I think has touched us all. A very profound speech, and I'm very delighted that you are ready to take questions. May I ask to the audience who would like to ask a question? Over here.
Mr. Director, thanks for the question. Mr. Secretary General, my name is Günther Fellinger-Jahn. I run the Austrian campaign for enlargement of NATO, of Austria and Kosovo and other countries. But don't worry, I will not ask you about Switzerland joining NATO, but my concrete question is about Kosovo joining the Council of Europe, because we had a very close opportunity to enlarge the Council of Europe and Kosovo to be full member, but unfortunately it didn't materialize recently, and I would like to know your opinion and how Kosovo can ultimately join the Council of Europe. Thanks a lot.
Please, Mr. Secretary.
Well, thank you for this question. About Switzerland in NATO, I have nothing to say. No more in charge in Switzerland, and maybe it's easy for me to not to answer the question. No, about Kosovo, thank you for the question. It's a question that has now a quite long and difficult history, because Kosovo is a candidate for joining the Council of Europe. The Committee of Ministers in charge of deciding, the representation of member states, how is it possible to have Kosovo on board, decided to ask the views of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe on this. The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe gave a positive assessment on Kosovo joining, and it came back to the Committee of Ministers. It is the responsibility now for the member states to decide in a two-thirds majority, at least, if they are ready to have Kosovo as a member, yes or no. That's just the fact where we are in this process. What I feel now, I feel that there is no stable majority at the moment, if I may be so transparent, between the member states for having Kosovo on board for different reasons. In fact, it should be the role of the Committee of Ministers of answering this question, not mine, but I try to do the best with what I understand of the situation. It must be a decision of two-thirds of the member states, and it's clear if we see the reality that we have on the continent. I was always underlining that the advantage being a member of the Council of Europe is to have a good protection for the citizens of the country, for the people living in the country, because as a member you have to commit to the European Convention on Human Rights and also to accept the execution, to execute the judgments of the court. That means for the population it is always a positive element to have the country being a member. But saying this, it is a decision of the member states to take Kosovo as a member or not. It is an open question. I think it is a difficult question at the moment, but I hope that it will be soon a clear answer to this question. This unstable situation now is not positive for nobody, I would say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alfred Karl, European Capital of Democracy. Mr. Secretary General, I would like to first of all thank you for lending the patronage to one of our events here in Vienna. 2 months ago, we organized the Innovation in Politics Awards, and you, together with the President of the European Parliament, gave your patronage to this. This relates to what you were talking about before, which is, I think, a very important discourse on democratic security. Someone has framed this also as democracy as our critical infrastructure. I think that's something we should keep in mind. But I also think that it is about the narrative that those who are opposed to democracy try to argue now more and more that other means of governance are more effective. And I think it is very important for us to show that democracy delivers to the population, just as you said. Just as you just said that, the Council of Europe delivers protection to the citizens with the means of the European Convention on Human Rights. I think just to appeal to the people to be democratic is one thing, and it's important, but I think we need to showcase that democracy actually produces concrete results. This is what we are trying to do, but I think this is also a necessary part of the discourse in general. Thank you.
I think it was more a statement than a question, but
Yes.
I can make another statement if you want. I have a lot of things to say to this.
Well, thank you so much. So we will ask for a question, really, over there.
Probably don't need the microphone, but I'll take it if you like. Hi, I'm Neil Holland. I'm the UK's Perm Rep to the OSCE, and nice to see you again. So I've got a double-header question, if that's all right with you. The first is sort of to test you a bit on the diagnostics. And it occurred to me that you come from a particular brand of democracy as a Swiss citizen that's a bit different to the one that we experience in the UK, for example. It's much more direct, participative, consensus-based. And I wondered whether that makes any difference at all. Is it the type of democracy that we're using that has an effect on people's lack of faith in it, or whether that's across the board? So I'd be interested in that perspective. And then a question to you and to the rest of the panel on outcomes. It sort of builds on the statement from earlier. And the question that I had was, what steps does politics, or do politics and multilateralism need to take to either deliver better the outcomes that citizens are looking for, or to better explain itself that it's already delivering those outcomes and increase the visibility and understanding that's required to do that? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I would start with the first question. I will make the link with your intervention because it's the same topic. Maybe with this assessment, first of all, we may have the impression that democracy is no more delivering. But the problem is not democracy. The problem is this huge sequence of crises we are witnessing since 15 years, I would say. And let me start with as I met this morning, with the finance crisis. I was really naive, also as an economist in 2008, I was thinking this finance crisis is first of all a problem for the banking sector. I was totally wrong. It was, sure, a problem for the banking sector, but then the consequence was an explosion of inequalities all around Europe and also all around the world. Then we had the debt crisis. Then we had this situation more difficult with, for the people living in our societies. Rise of populism, looking for scapegoats in this situation. Then we had the war in Ukraine, Crimea 14. We had then the crisis of multilateralism. Then we had the COVID crisis. Then we had the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 22 by Russia. This is trying to occupy all Ukraine. And during all this time, climate change. And what does it mean for young people? All the people aged less than 35 years today, they spend the majority of their lives in crisis situations, always hearing there is not really a good perspective for all of us. I come back to 93, the moment where they have this summit in Vienna. I was 21, University of Neuchâtel, starting my studies. I can tell you, for me, my impression was the world was eternal, democracy also as well, and also the values. Everything for the best, for the better, and progressing in the right direction. And it was not a problem for me, age of 21 in 1993, to have the impression that I can make some plans for 25 years because it will be stable. What is the situation of a young people age of 21 years today? War on the continent, this huge sequence of crises. What will happen in 5 years? Impossible to know. And I just forget artificial intelligence. Small anecdote, Artificial Intelligence Summit in Paris, February, Palais de l'Élysée in France. A dinner with few people, and Sam Altman was there. And somebody was asking Sam Altman, you know, the founder of the ChatGPT and the OpenAI. Where will we be with artificial intelligence in 5 years? The answer, 5 years, no idea. It is an eternity. So I don't know for you, but for me, I intend to be here in 5 years and to know more or less how will look like the future. That's exactly the point. That's not the responsibility of democracy. It is this huge sequence of crises and acceleration of all technological changes and all those elements. It is destroying perspectives, making it difficult to understand what it means, and it gives the impression that it is not more delivering. And it's easy to say, okay, democracy is responsible for this. I'm long. I'm sorry, because it's a very important element. Now, this difference between democracy. You know, I don't like when we try to do a kind of specific model of the democracy in Switzerland. It doesn't work so well. It's probably a bit more easy to make it real for all the people if you have to vote every second month on investment on the community, the new road there, the new shop there. I mean, you see the difference. You can vote on something and you have some difference. But I mean, it changed nothing about the fact that democracy, even also about, you know, every 4 years voting for a project of society, giving a majority to a party, and doing this at the national level, but also at the regional level, community level, it must be able to understand that it is the best way to choose what you want to have as a model of society. But I think the real answer is to have stability, perspectives, and we will be able to then show that that democracy is the best model to deliver. We have other models and democratic models. I don't want to live in another one. That's the difference.
Maybe just for the sake of the discussion, I dare to sort of challenge you on some of your answers. The first one would be that if we think of the 70s and 80s, there were crises too. I mean, I was young. I thought I would die by an atomic strike, or that, you know, it was Chernobyl. And
you are not that much older than me.
I mean, I think we're the same age, but I was conscious and I thought there could something happen. There was the so-called Waldsterben, the dying of the forest. There was domestic terrorism. The Red Army faction killed people. And planes were kidnapped, and so on. So there were crises. I think the difference to today is that democracies were able to give answers. And with all the crises that you list, the question is why is it that people in China allegedly think that they can give answers? So democracies must give answers. I would also think that all the crises that you list and that make our life difficult come on top of probably even more problematic developments that started way earlier, such as party decline, party membership decline. Parties don't play the role that they used to play in the golden 80s or 90s. This is totally independent of 2008. It's also the demographic catastrophe. This is also a really huge problem for I think democracies, and the atomization of societies, which, you know, starts in the 70s and 80s. So all these come on top of the things, and they accelerated the crisis of the 2000s. I think accelerated this. And make giving an answer more difficult. And I like what you said in your talk. There is no way back. We cannot say that the future of liberal democracy is what it used to be 10, 15 years ago, or 20 years ago. We need to imagine something new, and we need ideas on that front.
If I may just add two things. One is that what you said about stability and perspective. I think the worst what we can do is to look at the multiplicity of crises and to just sit there idle and look at it and not look to the future and develop a vision and also an initiative. Democracy is about being forward-looking, being active. And so this is why I appreciate so much your new plan, because it calls on us and every single individual to go out and to support our democracy, to fight for our democracy. And let me say a second thing, which I think is so important to preserve democracy. You were mentioning all the fake media, all the trolls, and the case of the Republic of Moldova, where I used to be ambassador and where I felt so strongly that they made it, even in the referendum, by 50.38%. But yes, they made it, and it was really difficult. I think what we need to do is to support journalism. We need to work on to support journalists who go out there, who do fact-checking, who counter all the fake media messages, who are the filter that society needs to not be drowned in this flood of propaganda that we are being hit at every day. So I want to make really a big plea for supporting independent journalism and to make sure that we keep this filter and democracy. And other than that, because you mentioned the young people, we definitely need to give them a perspective and not to basically be disappointing when we talk about the multiplicity of crises. As you mentioned, there have always been crises. Now we have an abundance of them. Very sad, but nevertheless, we need to look forward. We need to bring optimism to the world and to the optimism to be able to preserve our democracy. Please.
Rauchmark Institute of the Danube region, Central Europe. I have a question concerning the funding, because this avalanche of disinformation is also costly. When we look back at Moldova, it said in the media 300 to 350 million euros only, and it goes back all the way to Brexit. Even there was some financing already. So we were just looking for many years without reacting much, and the funding, this is a big question. How would you define? Thank you. Also for independent journalists, institutions to act against. Thank you.
Maybe I try to bring elements for an answer. I mean, the whole discussion about journalism, you know, we come from a world where it was seen that a system with a kind of concurrence, I mean, with different players, we make sure that we have good information with the necessity level of quality. And maybe today we must think a bit more in the quality of information or information quality like a kind of public good. We could maybe it could help, you know, to envisage the future. How can we make sure that we have stability in a good access to information, verified information with a certain level of quality, a minimal level of quality? And it's changed because, I mean, we must just remember that 25 years ago, to be able to produce news and to access to a public, it was extremely expensive. It was only possible for big groups. And those big groups had at the same time also a certain, code of conduct about the quality. And now, since maybe Facebook or the social media, it is possible basically for just one person alone to produce one thing and to reach a global audience. That makes a huge difference. That's the first point, maybe. Second point, I mean, the whole discussion about the regulation of social media. It is also a point that we need to address. And I see a quite big difference between what the US are doing and what we are doing in Europe. In Europe, we continue to believe that, you know, with strong and complicated regulation, we can achieve something. For example, no access to social media for young people aged under 18. And I had this conversation with some head of governments on our continent. They, I want to make, you know, a regulation, a law. We'll pass a law to just block the access for the young people under 15. And my answer was, okay, and what do you think? They are not able to use a VPN? Oh, yes, true, that's true. Okay, no, it's not efficient. And we need to think about this. I don't have the solution, but we need to think about this. What are doing the US? Quite interesting what happened with TikTok. Just decided to make TikTok a public asset, more or less, and to have a control. I mean, I'm not telling you neither that it will be the way. We just need to think in those categories and to see what will help us to have a certain control to protect democracy. And I just tell you this because I had a very interesting conversation with Jan Bremmer in New York. You know Jan Bremmer, editorialist, in New York last September. I was asking him, what do you think we could do in Europe to have a better situation with social media? The answer was clear. Stakes, being a stakeholder in big companies. Buy 10% of the tech companies and make your voice heard. I mean, I think it's not European to act in this way. But we should be open and to think out of the box, because what's happening right now with social media and with deep fakes and with the disinformation is huge. And it is a huge threat to democracy. And we need to address it. Moldova, that you mentioned before, which is a very good example, when we see, they have been probably naive with the constitutional vote in 24, and they received a lot of manipulation and disinformation and foreign interference. And then for the next election, for the legislative, they did it differently. Really interesting. What happened in the meantime? We need to address this. I had 2 conversations with Maya Sandu, the president, on this, and it is extremely interesting to see what they did to make sure that it is possible to have a good quality for the next election. But at the same time, it's not possible just to abandon the country and to tell them, well, do what you want. We need to think about this together, maybe creating a kind of toolkit, that we can use. It must be enshrined clearly in laws. It must be clearly compliant with the European Convention on Human Rights, but then to think what we could do maybe to have a good protection for democracy in this situation.
Maybe all the way in the back. It was the first hand that went up.
Maybe you take also some.
I have like 10 minutes.
Thank you. Ivan Kalpadakis, I'm the permanent representative of Greece to the OSCE. Secretary General, you come from a country that is very clear on principles, but also very active in diplomacy, and difficult diplomacy, not just easy diplomacy. And I would like to ask you about the relationship between democracy and diplomacy. A few years ago in the United States, in the past, not so long ago, we had the idea of a conference on democracy. And from that idea came this idea of promoting diplomacy, but in a way that separates countries to democracies and authoritarian states. Yeah. Do you think this is helpful for promoting democracy as a diplomatic concept, or do you think that there are other ways to do it more effectively? Thank you.
It's a really difficult question. Who wants to answer? Can you help me?
If I can just maybe one clarification. I think it's important to say it's not between democracy and non-democracy. It's between liberal democracy and the rest. So the attacks on the way we think we should run public affairs is not on the Democratic Pact, because all of them also claim that they are democracies. East Germany was the Democratic Republic of the and so on. So it's the liberal.
And if I may, on this question, I think, and we try now. We launched at the Council of Europe this idea to have a discussion about the new Democratic Pact, what it needs to adapt, because there is no way back to the ancient world, what it needs to adapt to the new world that we have with social media and all those things. And I'm fully aware about the fact that when we mention democracy, we all agree about the importance of democracy. I think that democracy is good, it's the right way to manage a country and to take decisions. But I think if we go deeper in the discussion on democracy, I'm sure that we will see huge differences between what it means for all of us, depending on our experiences, backgrounds, traditions, histories of the country. And then it will be much more complicated to agree on what we mean and what we can achieve together. That's the balance we need to find. It's really difficult. First element I wanted to mention, and the second between diplomacy and democracy. I think it was a very interesting conversation I had also with Antonio Guterres. He told me, because he was remembering the good years he had as a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, by the way, in the 90s. And he was telling me about democracy. We have at the Council of Europe a strong commitment, even if it is different in all the countries, for democracy, rule of law, and human rights. We can have then a discussion about how it is implemented. It's a different discussion, but the commitment is there. For the UN, there is no commitment about democracy, and there is a discussion if democracy is to understand in the general statute for the UN. It's not the case. It makes a difference. That means we have a continuum, and we need to make the discussion on this. But I think not only on democracy, it is related with all the values. I mean, I would maybe claim here, maybe it's wrong. It would be interested to hear what you think. I will claim here that there is no stable and strong rule of law without democracy. Because in an authoritarian regime, you could have something like rule of law, but then it can change one day to the next day because the dictator decides to change. And I will also claim at the same time that there is no good protection for human rights without to have a stable, strong rule of law. And there is no a strong and stable rule of law without democracy. That means if we want to have discussions, and we need to have discussions not only between us, but also outside of the continent and all around the world. That's why we have also an external, policy for the Council of Europe. We need to take the elements together in this complexity, and we need also to accept this complexity.
If I look to our time, we would have I think 3. Is this fine with you? 3 more questions. Yeah. There was one here, the lady here, and the lady here. Maybe we start here in the back.
Thank you. My name is Nazari Stacek, and currently I am visiting fellow at the University of Vienna, and originally I came from Ukraine, and my question will actually address the war in Ukraine. You brilliantly mentioned fruitfulness and leading role of Council of Europe in taking accountable Russian Federation because of their war of aggression against Ukraine. But currently we are following and experiencing some kind of tries about peace negotiations. And my question is to what extent Council of Europe is principled and is consistent in its efforts to continue to develop these efforts that you mentioned about register of damage, ad hoc tribunal, and other measures. Thank you.
For me, I think the question.
Like to take all 3?
No, I can take
okay.
this question. It's an important question. The Council of Europe is not an organization able to make the difference taking sanctions. We are not an organization able to make the difference with the power of money because we have a lot of possibilities to act with this. It is not an organization able to make the difference in military systems, defense weapons. We don't have this. Where we have a strong added value, it is on accountability and justice. And I think it's exactly what we need now. When I say back to fundamentals, it is also to have complementary work and collaboration between organizations, each one doing the best possible work where it is the strongest. And for the Council of Europe, it is in those questions. First of all, with the European Court of Human Rights. I mean, it's impressive for me to recall in this context that it is the only court adjudicating an everyday basis violations of human rights in the context of the aggression of Russia in Ukraine. And it's not few cases. We have thousands of cases pending now before the court. And then the question, Russia was expelled, in 22, and no more, member also for the convention since September 22. Yes, that's true. But the whole phase of the war between 14, it started in 14, we should never forget this, it started not in 22. The whole phase between 14 and September 16, 22 is covered by the convention and the court. And Russia is not possible just to escape. That's the first point. The second point is the register of damage and the claims commission for this special tribunal. I mean, we are just committed to make another step and to find the strongest possible support to do this. Where will we land with this for Ukraine and with Ukraine? I don't know. And if we ask this question, it means that we are asking ourselves, what does it mean exactly? It's not the point. Here is just like, I mean, I come from a mountainous country, you know, when you are walking in the mountains, it's one stable step after another. As fast as possible, but stable. It's exactly what we are doing. And I feel a strong support at the Council of Europe from the Parliamentary Assembly, from the Member States, from the Committee of Ministers. There is a strong dedication to these goals. That means we are continuing quite tough and direct for the goal.
Thank you. The lady over here.
Okay. Hello, Elena Gagnize, European Capital of Democracy. You mentioned Moldova several times, and it's really essential, it's really important for the democratic path, but what about the South Caucasus, especially Armenia and Azerbaijan? What is new policies, developing new relationship between each other, especially also Armenia and Turkey and Georgia, when people are fighting for the democracy? How this new path from the Council of Europe will change any approaches, or there will be any plans for this for the region itself? So yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
No, thank you. Addressing the South Caucasus, for me, it's a very important region. I mean, not only because we have member states and the three countries are member states, but also because South Caucasus is an extremely interesting region. And it is a kind of triangle if we see the politics. And on the one side of the triangle, you have Russia. I mean, threatening. It's not so an easy neighbor for the region. Second element, you have Iran. And on the third phase of the triangle, it's Europe. Okay, Turkey, a founder member of the Council of Europe, and Europe. And that's why it's so important not to forget how important this region is for the region, for the people covered by the European Court of Human Rights, but also for Europe. It is, by the way, also the way we have in the direction of the East, between Russia and Iran. That's why we are also engaging with Kazakhstan. It's not always easy, but we are doing this. And now taking the South Caucasus, I mean, well, we commend this positive evolution between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's a difficult situation. There was a war 30 years ago, a war 3 years ago. It is open at the moment. We should never forget that it's not I mean, there's a ceasefire, it's calm, but we have this situation, and we are strongly dedicated to support and to work with both countries to achieve peace. And I feel there is a very positive development in the recent month. I mean, this handshake between Prime Minister Pashinyan and President Aliyev means a lot. And I'm particularly also impressed by the strength that Armenia in this difficult situation is showing for achieving peace. Georgia is a more difficult situation at the moment. We have strong signals of strong backsliding in Georgia. That's not good. I try to be in close contact with Georgia to say, hey, what's happening? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? What do you want to achieve with this evolution? And I mean, it's difficult at the moment, but it's changing also quite rapidly. We will continue to be in contact and addressing clearly the situation and telling what is not okay, what's not going well, and it's clearly in the evolution a bad situation. One more thing, the role of Turkey in the whole region. I mean, this long-standing partnership between Turkey and Azerbaijan for well-known reasons. Now, these contacts between Armenia and Turkey, what does it mean? It's extremely strong as a signal, knowing the history of both countries, knowing that Prime Minister Pashinyan invited for the next EPC next year in Yerevan President Erdogan and President Aliyev. What does it mean exactly? It means not less than the fact that Russia, because Turkey is strong in the South Caucasus, has never been as weak as now in the South Caucasus, I would say since decades. And when I said this to special directors, they said since centuries. I mean, it is just a geopolitical evolution really strong, and that's why it's so important that we are in close contact with the 3 countries of the region, even if we have difficult evolutions. And that's why, by the way, the European Union is also accompanying quite closely the countries in the whole region. I hope it is a part of an answer at your question.
The last question comes from the Austrian Foreign Ministry. Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, as you just said, Ulrike Butschek from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Secretary General, for coming to Vienna, and thank you also to the Diplomatic Academy and the Central European University for hosting us tonight. My question was actually triggered when you outlined the link between rule of law and human rights and democracy. Obvious to us, but I wonder whether you're having this conversation also with other parts of the world. You mentioned the UN, and you have, of course, you have African Union, you have the Latin Americans, you have Asians, ASEAN, and so on. Is this a conversation with the link to democracy and rule of law and human rights that you can have with them, or are you having it on the geopolitical landscape? I think this would be fascinating, because there's this permanent claim that yes, democracy is going down, it's a Western concept and so on, but the links are there. So
yeah, no, thank you for the question. I will start to answer with a short anecdote, and then I will speak about what we are doing with countries outside of the Council of Europe and also with regional organizations. The short anecdote: I was opening the Astana Forum in Kazakhstan last May. 6 speeches for the opening ceremony. Heads of states, 1 former UN Secretary General, 1 General Director of a big multilateral organization, global multilateral organization, and myself. 6 speeches, and at the end, one of the head of state present turned to me and asked me, did you notice that you have been the only one using the word democracy? And it was true, it was a fact. And yes, I noted this, and I asked him, yeah, what does it mean? Why is it so? You know the answer? The answer was democracy. This word become woke. Voila, that's the anecdote. We start, I mean, in some parts of the world, we start at this level. That's the first element. It's not so encouraging, but it's a reality. It was a reality. Well, now, what are we doing? I'm engaging a lot. I'm also using my network, you know, in Africa and also in South America and in another continent to have a lot of contacts outside of the continent. That means when we are in Europe, I work a lot with member states to make sure that we have a certain coherence also in the dynamic that we have together, even if it's not always so easy, because we are witnessing right now not more so stronger convergent world, but more divergent forces in action. But outside, I took the opportunity, the UN, for example, to exactly concentrate more effort on other continents and countries. And yes, clearly we address those elements. Why not? I mean, it is our role to do this and to try, you know, with the open conventions that we have, to find open conventions where there could be an interest for the countries to join, and then to experience together what it means. With not so bad results. We have now, for example, for the AI convention, artificial intelligence, new countries joining. Uruguay is joining. We had before, you know, Japan, USA, Mexico, Canada, Israel, and a lot of different countries. But now Uruguay is coming. We are envisaging to have others also on board, and to address exactly this, because this AI convention is made also to protect democracy, rule of law, and human rights in the context of the development of AI, and to do this also with other conventions. Cybercrime, for example, is a good avenue, you know, to have countries joining, even if they are not so sharing all the views we have on the values, but engaging together will help us to make some progress, to try at least to make some progress. I do this Also a lot on the African continent. I was recently in contact with the president of Rwanda. Not always easy, but it's an interesting also partner. With DRC. DRC just joined the center north-south of the Council of Europe, interestingly. We'll be very soon in Nairobi for a cybercrime conference, also with contact with William Ruto from Kenya. I had also a very interesting conversation recently with the new president of Mozambique, President Chapo. I mean, we try to do this and to present what we are doing at the Council of Europe and to try to expand also the contacts and the collaborations. Now, the next point about regional organization. I'm strongly convinced that at the moment where we see that multilateralism is in a quite difficult situation, and as you mentioned, thank you for the introduction, the too kind introduction, by the way, but as you mentioned, I had the privilege in 23 to participate regularly at the meetings of the UN Security Council, representing Switzerland, being a non-permanent member of the Security Council in 23. And I noted what it means to have, 5 countries with the veto, and among them Russia, USA, and China. Quite difficult to make some progress on the biggest, most important issues. And I'm strongly convinced that regional materialization with this higher commitment of certain elements and higher coherence can deliver, but not only for the region that they represent. The Council of Europe can deliver not only for Europe, we can deliver in the accountability in Ukraine, for the whole world. That's why we have, by the way, Australia just joining now the Register of Damage. And I'm convinced that it is possible to do work also with other regional organizations. That's exactly why we try now to organize, to structure the dialogue, a more structured dialogue with other organizations, among them the African Union, and among them also the Organization of American States. We will start so, and then possibly also to strengthen those efforts and to have more and more, and trying where we are strong to deliver, but not only for us. I mean, also for other organizations, also for the UN, for the largest world. That's, by the way, exactly the reason why we are at the Council of Europe opening right now an office in New York. It's not just to have an office in New York. It's because an accountability and justice we can deliver where others are blocked.
Well, I think we need to let the Secretary General go to his dinner, but I would like to thank you very much, first of all, to take so much time to answer the questions here. Secondly, for really showing to us this tremendous role that the Council of Europe is playing and can play and will play in the future. I have to thank a few people, of course, first of all you, but also our co-host and Rector Carsten Schneider. Thank you for being the co-host tonight. I thank our Perm Rep to the Council of Europe, Ambassador Aloysia Wergeter, for bringing you to us. Very much appreciated. Thank you so much. All the guests of tonight, and thank you for the wonderful questions. I think it was a really good debate and a lot of food for thought. We will continue to chew on it. And thank you so much, and have a wonderful stay in Vienna, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Very impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you.